Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. As usual for the WFA, we're delighted to welcome many of you from multiple time zones. Very warm welcome to this latest WFA webinar. Just to preempt a couple of questions, we usually have these posed to us. We will share the presentation with you after this session, and we'll also make a recording of the webinar available for you to share with your colleagues. We should have you with us for just under an hour today. As usual, this will be an interactive session, so please feel free as we go through just to post your questions into the Q&A widget you should be seeing on the right hand side of your screen. And we'll also have a couple of polls as well, so just keep you on your toes and involve you as we go through. Nothing too onerous. Today we're going to be focusing on an area which is much talked about, but also very hard to deliver against, which is customer centricity. And before we get into that, I'm just going to provide you with some quick introductions. We're really pleased to welcome our star, if you like, of the show, Richard Townsend, who's the co-founder of a very exciting company you may have come across, Circus Street. WFA have worked with them many times in the past, and we're really pleased to welcome them back. You probably also know my colleague Annie, who would have sent you this invitation and also be managing this webinar today. She'll looking forward to receiving your questions as you go through. And the rather keen-looking person on the right is me. I'm not quite sure why I used that photo, but anyway. I think I know most of you. So looking forward to sharing with you today. So for those of you who don't know us and are less used to the WFA, just to clarify in terms of who we are, we're basically a network of, first of all, 60 national advertiser associations, so including ISBA in the UK, UDI in France, ANA in the US, ABA in Brazil, so 60 markets around the world, and also now over 80 of the world's biggest brands. So you should have those, able to see those logos in front of you there. So, and no matter how big or sophisticated those brands are, they're arguably facing, or you are arguably facing, more challenges now than ever before. And just to touch on a couple of those, ad blocking obviously very high on a lot of people's agendas. In the past year, we've seen an increase of over 40% in terms of usage. I think mid last year that was about 200 million active users of major browser extensions that block ads. And it's only growing, as you can see from the chart in front of you. In the USA, in terms of desktops, nearly 40% of users are now ads. In Asia Pacific, where mobile usage is much more prevalent in terms of internet access, nearly 35% are now blocking their ads on mobile devices. So a huge challenge for brand owners, of course. And we're also witnessing a decline in trust in terms of really people tuning brands out. So you might have seen this have us a meaningful brand study from last year, where most people said actually they wouldn't care if 74% of all brands disappeared for good. But in the interim, it would seem, according to SIBO, that 80% of us, in terms of marketers, believe actually that they've been great customer experiences. But when you ask the same question to people that they're trying to connect with, only 8% of them currently agree. So real disconnect there, and of course all of these challenges are linked, and it comes down to people really switching on in terms of in relation to brands and our communication. And not to put too fine a point on it, we're part of the problem as it stands. I've taken a chart here from our friends at Millward Brown that they call the share of voice arms race, and you might call it sort of a vicious cycle, if you like. So as people as a response to commercial messaging reduces, so brands tend to increase their share of voice and shout louder, which makes matters worse, obviously, and exacerbating the whole issue. Even members we talk to, and we'll be talking to global CMOs in Cannes next week, really talk about sort of trying to break that vicious cycle and moving to a more customer-centric approach. But how many of them are actually genuinely realizing that goal? For our part, the WFA, we responded this through that CMO forum that we'll be meeting next by creating Project Reconnect. It's beyond the scope really of this webinar today to go into great detail here, but this is an initiative that's designed to really help our industry listen to people and understand what audiences want actually don't want as well from brands. And just to sort of shamelessly name drop in relation to the marketing leaders who make up the advisory board of that group, you might recognise some of the people on here. Keith Weed from Unilever, for example. Our president, David Weldon, who's another global CMO of RBS. Ahmed in the top left, who's now chairing our CMO forum in Asia, for example, just to name a few. And ultimately, with this initiative, what we're trying to do is really inspire and empower brands to lead the change. Internally within their organizations, yes, but also externally in the way that they're creating connected experiences with their audience. So ultimately making the shift towards a more people-centric approach. And that inspiration, if you like, is really the same reason that we're putting Circus Street in front of you today. For those of you who don't know, Circus Street is an e-learning platform. Whilst we at WFA, we don't recommend any companies, I think I'm allowed to say that actually we really find their product to be genuinely inspiring, and we use it ourselves actually. And I think Richard kindly at the end is going to offer you a bit of a trial of the tool. But before I do hand over to Richard, I'm just going to hand over to you in a quick poll. So the question you should be seeing in front of you is, do you think digital technologies will be an enabler or a barrier to your organization becoming more customer focused? So hopefully you have the opportunity to vote now in terms of whether you feel it's an enabler or a barrier, or neither, or you're not sure. Just while you're doing that, please do take the time to at any point during this drop your questions through the Q&A widget. As I said, Annie will be fielding those questions at the end. We'll have plenty of time to ask them to Richard. So okay, good, pretty clear cut, with 86% saying as enabler, as you would hope, and interestingly 14% saying actually it's neither. Interesting to sort of get into that in a little more detail, but on that note, Richard.
Hello everybody, thanks for that, Rob. As Rob said, that my presentation is around technology and the rise of the customer-obsessed organisation, and obviously the results of the poll are interesting because my job today is to look at technology in relation to why we've started to focus more on the customer. So what I'm going to take you through is a quick introduction to Circus Street, just to explain a little about who we are, so as to give you an understanding of why we might have credentials to speak in this area. I'm then going to look at why we are talking about customer centricity, why now, because at the end of the day, all of us are focused on our customers, and good businesses always have been. So why are we talking about it now? Why is it such an issue? And then I'm going to focus on 7 ways that you can become more customer centric. There are obviously a lot more than 7 ways, but these are the things that we feel if companies get them right, then they're achievable and are going to make a difference to the relationship that they will have with their consumers and customers. And then at the end, obviously, we will have some questions. So Circus Street, to give you a brief outline of who we are, we're an online learning business that teaches people about media and communication technologies and the impact on media and marketing, but increasingly their impact on business. We don't really like the word or phrase e-learning because it conjures up images of something that kind of happened before us. We're trying to push the boundaries a little bit of what's possible in terms of using technology to teach people things. And we, yeah, sorry about that, Rob. She said that. But we like to see ourselves at the intersection of these 3 industries. Education, because we're trying to write the marketing and business curriculum of the future. I'll talk more about that in a second. Visual media, because we know now that the visual arts and visual media is a really compelling way for people to engage with education. And technology, because technology is what enables us to deliver an interactive experience across the globe. It also enables us to have a reporting suite that looks at the way people use in our education, the scores that they make inside the product, and also therefore the return on investment for our customers. Our customers are global. Over 50% of our user base now is outside of the UK. We have 75 countries, McDonald's in 100 countries, Unilever in over 100 countries, WPP globally, and Kellogg's across Europe is just some of the examples of the businesses that use us. And they tell us that the reason they use us is fundamentally the engagement rates of the users of the product once they roll it out to their organizations. So we have engagement rates on average of over 90%, and complete are over 80%. And in the online education space, that tends to be unheard of. And it's the blending of these three areas that makes it such an engaging, rich learning experience. In the education box, we focus on three areas: language, channels, and disciplines. Language is the sort of nuts and bolts of digital. So things like what's the difference between the internet and the web, but all the way through to eventually we'll start to get into areas like coding. Channels are the new channels that have emerged as a result of digital. But disciplines, often we're talking about other areas other than technology. So we're talking about areas that have been changed as a result of technology. So brand planning might be an issue that falls in discipline, acquisition planning, or centricity. We have content writers internally and experts internally that help to curate. But the main thrust of the external experts who are picked who work in the marketplace. So that's a understanding of us. And as Rob says, we want to give an experience into the product. So we're happy to do that, and I'll explain more about that toward the end of the presentation. Why customer centricity digital? As I said earlier, good business has always been customer focused, but digital has put a new emphasis on the way that we have a relationship with the customer. So what I want to do first is explode what we mean by the word digital, because it's quite a vague word in many respects. It's very broad. It means different things to different people. I think it's important to utilize what it means to us, because it has a bearing on some of the things that we say later. So if we look at digital in the sense of it's just a set of ones and zeros versus an analog signal, which you might have had in an old TV. One of the first reasons people use digital because actually you can fit ones and zeros into the same space as you can fit into analog. But does that really tell us anything interesting about digital? If you look at these two products, say they were both digital. It's an old Casio watch and a DAB radio, which were very popular in the UK. But in actual fact, there's nothing particularly exciting about the watch, and DAB radio franchises. Most of the large radio broadcasters, abandoned DAB radio, moved away from it. So what's not good about this digital? I suppose it's brought into focus when you look at what's good about this digital. So it's another watch. Most of you will recognise that it's an Apple Watch. And on the right-hand side is a new version of a radio station, if you like, in the sense that that's the logo for Spotify. So what makes these businesses different? Well, what makes them different is that they connect to these two things, the internet and the web. And that's what we would refer to as communication technologies, media and communication technologies. The internet being a network of geographically connected computers and pipes in the ground. Sometimes that's a bit of a surprise for people. We often start our courses explaining this because we like to take people back to basics. But they're often surprised when they find out there are large pipes under the world's oceans, seas and oceans that deliver internet connectivity globally. The largest pipe is a pipe called SeaWe Me 4 that runs from Northern Europe all the way to Southeast Asia. And in the past, sharks have even bitten these pipes and created all kinds of problems for different regions when it comes to connectivity, believe it or not. And on the right-hand side, you've got the thing that Tim Berners-Lee created, which is the World Wide Web, which is effectively, he created the concept of hypertext, where you can click on a piece of text and move to a document in a standard format. And he created a standard format for all documents to be created in, which was HTML, and obviously the HT stands for hypertext. And then he created a browser so that we could all see those pages, and start that browser says HTTP, which stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol, which is just clicking on text and moving to other pages. Quite a simple concept, but those two things are really what have changed everything. And they change everything because they make things interactive and connected. So yes, they're digital, they help to define digital, but what comes out of them is that the world, your marketing and your business, and people increasingly start to realize that it's not just their marketing, but it's their business, have become interactive and connected. And out of that, we have three significant channels that have changed our relationship with our customers. So search, consumers can now search all the world's information online, which means consumers are more informed than ever before. Social, because consumers can connect, share, comment, making them more empowered than ever before. And mobile, because mobile devices mean consumers can access products and services anytime and from anywhere. And those three channels have changed the expectations of our customers such that they are higher than they ever have been. So that's a bit of context of the way that we see digital shaping the conversation around customer centricity. So what I want to move on to is, essentially, how do we become more customer-centric businesses? And we have 7 areas that we think businesses should focus on. So the first being build great products and services. It may seem obvious, but as Eric Schmidt, one time chairman of Google and now executive chairman of Alphabet, has pointed out in a book called How Google Works, power has shifted from companies to consumers, and the result, barriers to entry that have stood for decades are melting away. Every incumbent business is vulnerable to competition and disruption. And he goes on to say that it's therefore very important that you build great products and services, because a bad customer review will trump a great piece of marketing every day of the week. And so he does a good job of encapsulating that idea. I have this discussion with a friend of mine quite a lot. He is a black cab driver in London, and obviously black cab drivers have been put under pressure, and cab drivers generally across the world, by the advent of Uber. And we discuss why that is. And my argument to him is that ultimately, as much as black cabs are great and they offer a good service in many ways, that Uber is a better service because I can rate the driver, I can see where the driver's in relation to me, I don't have to carry cash, I can share a cab with a stranger, I can promote the services to others and receive vouchers. So while Uber is often credited as being a digital business, in reality, what Uber does is it offers a much better service when it comes to booking a cab. So we have a few heated conversations, as you can imagine, but fair play to my friend Granty. He has tried to respond to this threat and has recently installed cameras in his cab. And now when he stops at the side of the road, he says to prospective customers that they can have their cab ride for free if they will allow him to interview them. And he then interviews the ones that say yes. He films the interview, and if they have good stories, they become part of his media channel, and he shares the media channel with his customers. And so he's trying to develop a better customer-focused, more interesting customer service with his customers, which is great. The second lesson that I want to give is focus on the customer, not on the technology. So although technology has created a lot of this change, the response is often nothing to do with technology at all. So a good example is the UK-based retailer Asda, who pulled back with its Black Friday initiatives this year. The company said it wanted to avoid holding customers hostage over sales, a decision it made after listening to feedback. Andy Clark, the CEO, said the decision to step away from Black Friday is not about the event itself. Over the last 2 years, we've developed an organised, well-executed plan, but this year customers have told us loud and clear that they don't want to be held hostage to a day or two of sales. After considering customer input, Asda decided to offer discounts throughout the holiday season instead of focusing most of its promotions during Black Friday. So they may have used technology in the shape of social channels to gather the feedback, but the response from the business has been very little to do with tech and more to do with putting their customers first. Similarly, another good example is McDonald's and the turnaround they are currently in the middle of. Listening to customer feedback has been key to some early wins. The company is responding to changing customer tastes by serving only chicken that isn't raised with antibiotics. They've also announced that they're offering milk from cows not treated with an artificial growth hormone. On the international side, they announced that they will be expanding their all-day breakfast menu to the Gold Coast, a move that was informed by customer feedback. And the Chief Marketing Officer, Mark Lolbach, has said recently, we are always listening and taking on feedback from our customers, and all-day breakfast was one that people are always asking of us. Again, it's not really about technology, just putting the needs of their customers first. So most of the good examples of customer centricity have originated out of the fires of technology, if you like, but the response has been about really good old-fashioned understanding the customer and responding with things that they're asking the business for. So if you're going to invest in new technology, it's important that technology exists in the background and the benefits of the customers are in the foreground. A great example of this is the reinvigoration of the Disney World theme parks. I think this quote sums up what they were trying to achieve by the famous futurologist Arthur C. Clarke. He once said, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, and certainly that's what they were trying to do in this example. So Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, pumped nearly $1 billion into this venture called My Magic Plus, a sweeping plan to overhaul the digital infrastructure of Disney's theme parks to upend how they operate and connect with consumers. It may look unpretentious, but the bands that you're looking at now connect you to a vast and powerful system of sensors within the park. And when you visit the Disney World, the most remarkable thing about the Magic Bands is they don't feel remarkable at all. Our CEO took her family there recently and said it really does make the whole experience feel more magical. Part of the trick lies in the clever way Disney teaches you to use the bands, and by extension, how to use the park. It begins when you book your ticket online and pick your favourite rides. Disney servers crunch your preferences, then neatly package them into an itinerary calculated to keep the route between stops from being a slog or a frustrating zigzag back and forth across the park, which many of their customers were experiencing previously. Then in the weeks before your trip, the wristband arrives in the post, etched with your name and a message saying, I'm yours, try me on. If you sign up in advance for the so-called Magic Express, the Magic Band replaces all of the details and hassles of paperwork once you've touched down in Orlando. Express users can board a park-bound shuttle and check into the hotel. They don't have to mind their luggage because each piece gets tagged at your home airport so that it can follow you to your hotel, then your room. Once you arrive at the park, there are no tickets to hand over. Just tap your band at the gate and swipe into the rides you've already reserved. If you've opted in on the web, the Magic Band is the only thing you need. Sarah, our CEO, said it's amazing how much friction Disney has engineered away. There's no need to rent a car or waste time at the baggage carousel. You don't need to carry cash because the Magic Band is linked to your credit card. You don't need to wait in long lines. You don't even have to go to the trouble of taking out your wallet when your kids want to buy things. For Disney, the Magic Bands, thousands of sensors they talk with, and the hundred systems linked together to create My Magic Plus, turn the park into a giant computer, streaming real-time data about where guests are, what they're doing, and what they want. It's designed to anticipate your desires. So the customer never gets to see behind the curtain to see how the magic is created. Really, ultimately, that's irrelevant. They just have a better experience.
I love that Disney example. It's really interesting. And now we're going to just take the mic back from Richard for a moment and turn it over to you again. If you could sort of, with hand on heart, given that your answers will be anonymous to this, where would you say you are on your journey to becoming a more customer-centric organisation? So don't care, our focus is product, not consumer. Interesting to see some people voting on that. Not even started on our journey yet. Still at the early stages. Fairly advanced. We've nailed it and arrived at customer-centric nirvana. I'd be very surprised if anyone picked that one, but you never know. If you could just pose your questions there, and while I do, just a quick reminder to use our Q&A widget just to post your questions for Richard, and we'll have plenty of time at the end of this session for him to respond to those, and Annie and I will pose those questions to him. So there you go. Okay, good. So pretty honest group of members there, saying we're still at the early stages of this process, which is fairly consistent with the previous webinar we ran on that. So thank you very much for your responses there. And back to you, Richard.
Thanks. Great. That's very interesting. So the next lesson is teach everyone about marketing. And the reason we say this is because if everything becomes interactive and connected, then essentially you're in a daily dialogue with your customers right across the business. So everybody in the business needs to start to understand something about communications, because there are lots of different touch points with the consumer and customers, and they can happen through the use of social technologies and digital technologies in other places other than the marketing department. And we'll explore this a little bit further later. And if this is true, then everybody needs to know something about marketing. So it's not necessarily about teaching people about digital. It's teaching them about challenges. Highlighted also recently by McKinsey, who are saying in this quote that the assumption is that the CMO is the voice of the customer in the organization, and therefore will lead this charge. And to a certain extent, that's up for debate, because there are lots of other roles now that exist inside of a business, but notionally it's sensible, because the marketing people understand communications. And so if we're now to start talking about the business externally throughout the business, then there needs to be some tutoring from the marketing department. This is reiterated by a guy called Bill McCatis, who's the CMO of a company called Slack. Many of you used Slack. We use Slack in our organization, and they're what's described as an email killer, but effectively they are a real-time communication tool that works more in a social setting for businesses. And he says that when he arrived, he was the first marketing person. In a good way, everyone does marketing in the company, whether it's the sales team, the product team, or legal team. Everyone is interacting with customers in different ways. So he is now starting to feel that change inside of his business, and we certainly are as well. So if that change happens, another lesson for most businesses, really important, is that you need to embrace speed and agility as your new reality, because if different aspects of your business are communicating with your customers more freely, the expectation from customers now is that those responses happen immediately, and problems are solved very quickly. And so this is fundamental to being able to become a more customer-focused organisation. So I'm just going to give you a quick case study. It's a little bit older now, but I like to give it because I think it really encapsulates a business that is able to move at pace, to deal with customers and to deal with things very quickly. So this guy is a guy called Scott Monty. He was at the time global digital media, multimedia communications manager for Ford Motor Company, and he became quite famous in his field because of the great work that he was doing. While he was at the job, he's now moved on and is a consultant. But at this time, it was just after the financial crisis, and around the time of the auto industry bailouts. And Scott awoke to a tweet that had been waiting for him since 1:30 a.m. Essentially, a fan site called therangerstation.com had received a cease and desist letter that the site's owner received from the Ford Motor Company. The letter demanded not only that Jim Oakes, the site's owner, surrender his website's URL, but that he should also write Ford a check for $5,000 as a penalty. Not knowing what to do, Jim posted this dilemma to the Ranger Station's user forums, and it caught fire very quickly within 2 minutes of the post. And his post was, the Ranger Station is being attacked by the Ford Motor Company. A large number of angry comments had started appearing, and so this was the tweet that Scott awoke to. And he immediately at 7:29 said, right, I understand, I'm to get on this. Between his stream of Twitter posts, Scott was engaged in multiple conversations. The first involved his legal counsel, who explained that the Ranger Station was selling counterfeit Ford products. Scott learned that their letter to Jim Oakes was an attempt to make him to stop, with the demands for the URL and the $5,000 fee simply added as a legal scare tactic. But obviously at this stage it had caught fire, and Scott needed to deal with it. So Scott requested that the legal team separate the URL issue from the counterfeit one. The radio station was a 10-year-old fan site, and he knew that alienating Ford enthusiasts was not a smart way to proceed. The Ranger Station fire was fueled by the community's passion, and therefore he needed an alternative to a cold corporate statement to appeal to them. So he picked up the telephone and called Jim directly. So the two chatted and very quickly got to a resolution, which was much more amicable. And then Scott then planned to send out this resolution. And just as he was to do this, then the fire started again. So a Twitter user, Brett Trout, said the following, but again, Scott was on top of it. So he immediately fired back. We're not shutting down the site. We're asking that they stop selling counterfeit material, and started to then respond again. Eventually, he was able to post Ford's official response, and he asked his followers to retweet it so the message would get out about what had really happened. And that was at nearly 5 o'clock. Once the fire was contained, Scott spent the rest of the day continuing answering questions and challenging inaccurate statements. At 2:29 a.m., Scott sent his 138th and final tweet of the day. The total time from the origin of the Ranger Station fire starting to its containment was 22 hours and 26 minutes. So you can see that being able to move at this type of speed is becoming more and more essential for modern customer-focused businesses. So in order to do this effectively, the next lesson is that we need to collaborate and break down silos where possible. And obviously for large organizations, this isn't the easiest thing to always achieve, but it's something that over a period of time is essential if we're to become more customer-focused in this environment. So this is a quote from Tom Goodwin, who's Senior Vice President of Strategy and Innovation at Havas Media, the company that Rob talked about earlier. And he's saying that digital transformation, and which will lead to customer centricity, is not about a digital department. A mobile strategist won't save your company. It's not the role of any individual unit to take your company from irrelevance to leadership. So he's saying that it's a philosophy that needs to run right throughout the organization. Most businesses have silos that or sections within the company that look like this. When we're dealing with customers, they don't care about being served up by the right department. So saying is that functional silos will eventually need to become, if not redundant, invisible to the consumer, because these are the types of problems that currently exist for customers inside of this new environment, and the companies that succeed will be successful at getting over these problems. So often customers spend significant time repeating the most basic information, name, account numbers, passwords, every time they transact on the web, over the phone, and in person. So coordinating data, collecting data, and then delivering that data across departments is key. Employees don't have access to customer histories, much less their wants and needs, and that's probably more of an advancement to the way things will pan out. Websites don't remember what customers purchased, what they did, where they looked, or what interests them. And this type of information can only be delivered if we start to remove silos. And one of the simple ways that we can do this is to teach as many people as you can about technology. It's important to start talking to people about media and communications, but technology is also at the center of many of these problems. We had a quick look at our organisation, Circus Street, to look at the way that technology exists. We were an SME. We're not a huge organisation, and already you can see that every function within our business has different technology, internal but mainly external technology providers. What's interesting, though, over on the marketing side, you can see we have the usual channels like YouTube and Twitter and LinkedIn and those people that we deal with. But even in the finance channel, companies like Xero are using the same principles. They work off an app-based ecosystem. They've got social aspects. They've got strong APIs that link into other systems like Expensify. We have internal social networks like Slack. We have management tools like Trello. All of these pieces of technology work off similar principles. But the main point is that it's ubiquitous and it exists across the organization. Over a period of time, it's then working out what's the role of technology based upon what a customer is looking for your company to do. And Forrester Research have done some interesting work into delivering cross-touchpoint customer experiences, but based upon the technology at that particular juncture. So whether customers were searching, trying to get help, evangelizing, they've then mapped out the pieces of technology that will be needed in order to do that. And then obviously you can work back from that to understand which parts of the business that they work in, and then what skills are needed for people to be able to deliver those things effectively. And then the final thing is, the final lesson that we want to give you today is to measure the right things. Again, Bill McCatis has said recently, I tell my team members that their gold standard is not whether customers bought a product, but did they recommend us? It's a higher bar and a different standard. And the way that they do it, and a number of other businesses, and I'm sure some of you have heard of this and use it already, but it's one good example of how you can measure the impact of customer centricity on your organization is Net Promoter Score, because they ask one very simple question, which is, how likely is it that you would recommend our company, product, or service to a friend or colleague? Those who respond with a score of 9 to 10 are called promoters and are considered likely to exhibit value-creating behaviours. Those who respond with a score of 0 to 6 are labelled detractors, and they are believed to be less likely to exhibit the value-creating behaviours. Responses of 7 and 8 are labelled passive, and their behaviour falls into the middle of promoters and detractors. The reason that KPIs such as Net Promoter Score are important is there is a proven link between wanting to refer a product or service and business growth. A good example is Microsoft. Obviously, you'll have seen yesterday that Microsoft bought LinkedIn, and the CEO who conducted that acquisition says that he wants to change the culture of his company. As part of the company's new corporate mission, Microsoft is focusing less on things like revenue and profit Instead, Nadella wants to focus on leading indicators of success, such as customer love. Nadella has said that if people love Microsoft products, the rest will fall into place. So starting to measure whether people love you, are they prepared to recommend you, is an important KPI to understand whether you're becoming more customer-centric. So just a brief recap. These are our 7 lessons. Build great products and services. Focus on the customer, not the technology. Teach everyone about marketing. Embrace speed and agility as your new reality. Collaborate and break down silos where possible. Teach people about data and technology, and ultimately measure the right things. So as I said at the start of the presentation, everybody listening, if they want to have a look at Circus Street, then just get in touch with Rob, and we will send you a free log on to the product, and you can see the courses that we create. If it's of interest, we thought that it would be interesting for you and maybe a valuable resource. So that's it from me. Thank you.
Brilliant, excellent job, Richard. Thank you. A couple of questions for you. Obviously, members who are on this webinar, for the most part, work for quite complex matrixed organisations in a lot of cases, and so your piece about overcoming silos is obviously easier said than done. But in relation to digital, what's your views in relation to sort of digital marketing departments? Do you think companies should have moved on from that, or is that a smart move, or is that just a case of creating another silo?
I think ultimately moving on from that is quite difficult, because for all the things that we know about the market, there aren't necessarily the skill sets that exist currently within businesses, externally from businesses. So it tends to be that digital expertise comes in through a department, but ultimately, all of us want to be businesses that just exist within the world of technology, and we want to develop marketing that exists within the world of technology. They shouldn't be separate. Just like we don't have a paper department, we probably shouldn't have a digital department.
Okay, brilliant. And in terms of the sort of transformation that you're talking about, that we know from recent study, all of our members are going through that transformation right now. Who do you think should be sort of leading that charge? If you were going to put an individual heading it up, is it a CDO, is it a CMO, CEO, or someone else?
I think ultimately it needs to be the CEO. We have a number of clients where it starts there, and if it starts there, then everybody else follows. But as I mentioned in the presentation, the people who understand the customer and the consumer really well right now are the marketing department. So the CMO has a very specific role in extending that role across the organization and helping to embed customer centricity and skill sets across the whole organization.
That's brilliant. I mean, we are well within time. If anyone has any additional questions, we'll ensure that we pass those on to Richard. But thank you very much for your contribution today, everyone. Just to wrap up, as most of you will be aware, we have a lot of planned events coming up. So we will be, for those of you who will be in Cannes, we'll be there next week. Let us know. We do have some events lined up. We'd love to get you involved with, and also our marketing, procurement, and media forums will be meeting in Shanghai next week, but next month. So let us know if you're going to be in that part of the world. And also later this week, we're going to be doing another webinar relating to our recent ad fraud guidance that we just put out last week. So look out for an invitation to that session. So that basically just leaves for me to say a very big thank you to Richard. Thanks for joining us, Richard, and sharing.
Absolute pleasure.
And if you want to reach out to Richard directly, or to Annie or myself, you see our details on the screen here. So finally, just thank you for everyone for joining the webinar and for your votes and questions, and look forward to speaking to you soon. Goodbye.
Thanks. Bye bye.